Welcome back to another crazy little special episode of these DM clinics. This is my good friend Danielle Wallace. Hi Danielle.
Hi.
Danielle and I've never met in real life IRL, only through LinkedIn. But I love Danielle's content. She is a super nerd of super nerds, consuming everything she can get her brain attached to, and that's why I love her content. So I asked her to join us today, and Danielle, I will pass the mic to you.
Okay, that was such a nice intro. That was like the best intro ever. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you all. Um, this is always scary when I do that. Okay, so we good?
We're
We're
good.
seeing. Okay, so we're going to talk about typography, the unsung hero of direct mail, also digital. We're talking about mail today. Um, John introduced me. I'm Danielle. I'm at Grow Better. I work with small to mid-sized nonprofits to help them improve their fundraising. And small nonprofits is quite exciting because the ones that have very small list, when we dial everything in, the lift they get is very robust. We wouldn't see a 2 times improvement with a big list, but something like a small nonprofit, very exciting. And a lot of what we do is look at how are the letters arranged on the page? How is the eye going to skim the page? And so today, that's why we're kind of talking about typography. That is just a nice word for the art and technique of making the written word legible and appealing and readable on the page. Why is it important? I didn't see very many estimates on how much time someone spends looking at your page. I think this is a quite generous amount of seconds, 15 to 20 seconds to skim the appeal. Let's highlight skim. 80% of people skim, but that's if you get opened. So that's a lot of time. The other thing is, how does the eye skim the page? And this is from Siegfried von Vugela.
Yeah,
Tom
see, well, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Tom Ahern corrected me one time and I couldn't find his correction. It was in LinkedIn. Where does the eye go on the page? And so top right hand corner, you should know that by now. And then you'll see, is it to me? And then all the way down to the bottom, who's the signer and the PS. But if your text is messy, there's no way the skimmer is going to be able to collect any information within those 15 seconds. If it is easier to read, it is more likely to raise money. It is as simple as that. So that is why, again, we're talking about typography. Now, the average age of your donor is about 64 years old as of this year. So you're not writing for you. You're not writing, well, you could be writing for your board because they may be in their 60s, but you're writing for your donor. And that is where this comes into play. This is an old graph. I couldn't find one that was more recent, but the reason it's on here is I wanted you to see in blue is the size of the average gift. And then the horizontal axis is just how old are they? And basically the trend is as people get older, their gift size gets larger. So again, we're writing for eyes that are older. You are not older. And so let's just look at this. I've got 2 appeals. These were both from Who's Mailing What. I downloaded them. The one on the left, the one that has the penny insert and the one about blindness and then the racial justice, which one looks easier to read? You are not old and your eyes already know which one is easier. It's the one on the left, the one about blindness. A lot of that, again, we're talking about typography and we'll get into specifics, but let's just talk first about sentence length and paragraph length. On the left, you've got varied paragraph lengths. So 1 line long, 3 line long, 4 line long. That variation helps the eye track across the page quite well. And then you've also got shorter sentences. The one about racial justice, oh my, the one about racial justice, it was addressed to Claire. Never mind, I got it off her website. Oh gosh, I thought she was the writer. And she's not, it's just up here is her name. The one on the right, you just long sentences, every paragraph looks the same. So the next slide, as general literacy has increased, our ability to read and understand long sentences has decreased, which is quite interesting. So I don't even know the century. I just have on Publication Coach, on that blog, she lists, what was the average sentence length. So we started at 50 way back, 50 words in an average sentence. Today it's 14 to 18 words. So when you write your sentences, short and sweet, fragments are okay. You can break every rule you learned in your grammar class. I was the best at grammar, so it took me a while to figure out how to write for fundraising. Compound sentences are not your friend. What about the point? I always get this wrong. Point font size is what I want to say, but what is the size of your font? It should never be less than a 12 point. And I typically try to go to 14. You could even go larger than that, but I've not seen that happen. John can comment on that. Have you ever gone larger than a 14?
Oh yeah, I've gone up to like 20 point, 22 point and stuff. Especially depends on the appeal, who's going to. Legacy
Okay.
appeal would be quite big, or if I have the space, I'll just go. If my letter writers read me a one-page letter, but I have space for two, I'll go up to 24 point, no problem.
That's cool.
It's,
Because
it looks
that's
wild
cool. Well,
because
I I've not seen anything come to me that's like even 12 point. And so for me, doing a 16 point on an appeal, I always wonder, is that okay? So there you go, guys. That's awesome.
there's a reason why there's a large print edition of Reader's Digest where it is actually like 16 point. CNIB in Canada only uses 16 point or higher. Same with RNIB in the UK. I think they do 16 point or higher. So
That is really cool.
yeah.
Okay, so that's new to me. I'm excited about that. So it has to be above a 12 point.
Yeah.
The other thing is when you're reading a message that's got bigger words in it, we know that the bigger words are perceived as more important. So that's kind of why you'll see headings that are bigger than the body text. It's a mental anchor. So again, there's a lot of reasons to use bigger point font. Am I saying that right? Point font. Point font. But this is another reason. Font itself, the wrong font will torpedo your fundraising. Jeff Brooks talks a lot about technique on his blog, which is why he's in here. But I thought that was perfect. It will torpedo it. There are kind of two families of font. You've got Mama and Papa. You've got sans serif and serif. The serif though has that hook-like element, and like John's book, the Bible. I always say this, sorry, but the Bible of direct mail and how to do it really well and use creativity, all that creative deviations. He talks about this in there. The hook element though, at the end of the serif, some of these serif letters, that helps carry the eye across the page. So your message will be lost if your font is a mess. And so typically you want to reserve sans serif if you're going to use it for headings, and maybe pull quotes or call outs. But I've never done that in a direct mail appeal because I just don't want to risk it. Have you done much sans serif in print?
Well, I have only because again they're like CNIB Canadian National Institute for the Blind and Visually Impaired years ago like I don't know did a test, a comprehensive study on typography as it relates to people with visual impairments. They did it with a design school in Toronto. And basically what the nutshell of what they found out was that large size type it made the biggest difference for legibility and comprehension. So they
Yep.
found from a serif point of view versus sans serif,
Oh,
they were only using 16 point Verdana or higher. So Verdana is a sans serif font. I know it goes against what we typically follow, which is using a serif type in
yeah.
mail letters. But they found that any sort of like Verdana sans serifs like that, bigger version was totally fine.
Wow.
It didn't hurt the comprehension and readability and stuff. So there are charities out there who, again, if you go, work with a bigger agency, you get a lot of these sans serif fonts because they're more like current than people think they look more current versus a Courier or a Times New
Yeah.
Roman, which are like older fonts and stuff.
Yeah.
As long as you're using it really big, my basic understanding, as long as you're using it really big, it's not a problem. If you're going to use a Verdana at 10 point type, it's a problem. But same
Mhm.
with use two times New Roman at a 10 point, it's a
Yeah.
problem. So that's my, and they have not done the study. I asked them actually if they're going to do a follow-up to the study because I
Mhm.
think they could.
Mhm.
But I don't know when it was studied now for some time, but
Yeah.
I'm sure a colleague in the UK, I have some friends at the
That's awesome.
R&D. Yeah, same thing. It's an interesting thing to think about, but
Huh. Okay,
some
well
of
now you
it,
guys know. I'm learning that too. That's very cool. Yeah, the only other reason then to use serif would be if your audience is older and it feels nostalgic to them. That would be the only reason
that
then.
the
Like,
shape does help them visually move through the page. So there is something to the little kicks and the little
yeah.
doohickeys. It's like
Hmm.
the technical term doohickey.
Doohickey technical. Um, the leading. Okay, the leading I never paid any attention to. It didn't seem important to me. But it is important, especially when you compare leading to the paragraph spacing. So leading is that space between two lines of text. I have read in typography when I'm studying, it should be 1.5 to 2 points. I've never messed with it, but what I have messed with is the paragraph spacing. So your paragraph spacing should be at least 1.5 times larger than that leading. Look at the one on the left, so A, the space between the paragraphs looks identical to the space between the lines of text. Which simply just makes it harder to skim. If you go to the B version, you'll just see that paragraph spacing is larger. Then this is an example. And what I did years ago was I did the one on the left, the X. I didn't write this one, but my paragraph spacing was almost identical to the leading because I thought more white space, that's better. You just need to have enough contrast between the leading and the paragraph spacing. And obviously the one on the right here isn't that same recommended, that paragraph spacing isn't 1.5 times the leading, but John's creative deviations, I think, depending on what you're doing, you don't have to follow all the rules. If you know the rules, you know you can break them.
Exactly. Exactly. Do you know why they call it letting?
No,
Do you want to learn something really nerdy? So
I'm waiting on it. I'm learning more from. I'm excited. I should be in the audience today.
no, I learned this because I'm a little bit newer than old school, but the old school
You're
guy
new. You're not old. You're young.
and guys and women who used to be official typographers when they actually used real metal type, they'd use like metal letters and so they line it up on the boards in terms of
Yeah.
how they want the line to look like. But they used to have pieces of lead in their boxes. You ever seen those typography boxes at like
No.
antique fairs? Yeah. So they had pieces of it of leading and they'd put it lead and they'd put it between the lines of type. So if
Wow.
they wanted more space, they would add a bigger chunk of lead. If they want smaller space, that's why it's leading and stuff.
That's real old school.
That's real old school, but that's why they call it leading. So
Interesting.
it is a thing. But
But lead itself,
it was piece of chunks of lead.
geez.
Depending on how big the type was. If the
Yeah.
type was really big, you wanted a bigger chunk of lead. If the type was really small, you needed, because to your point, 1.5, 2 point, it's the space between the bottom of the letter and the top of the next letter.
Interesting.
So
Interesting.
yeah, it is nerdy, and some people
We're
don't give,
lucky.
some people don't give a
No,
shit.
I would never be doing anything written if I had to
Oh,
measure
there's
letting.
a lot of work. Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
work.
horrible.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry. Anyways, Danielle, go ahead.
no, it's awesome. Reverse type, just generally speaking, is disastrous.
Mm.
Um, it tends to be light text on a colored background. Actually, in this PowerPoint, I had to go, oh, I'll tell you, it's a perfect example of reverse type, my intro slide. I wanted to do it because I wanted to do it. It just looked cuter, but I shouldn't have done it for readability because it's hard. Should I go all the way back? I'm gonna go all the way back. If I go all the way back, that's hard to
Well,
read.
it's good. It's fine because it's big type. I'm okay with big type. It's
But it would be
font.
much better than if it was not half and half, if it was just maybe blue with white on the background. I don't know.
You're ideally for maximum contrast. The maximum contrast is black type on white paper. It's boring to a designer. It's boring to people who want
Yes.
things to look visually interesting. I don't, it's not, this is not about, I'm not here to entertain people. I'm here to let people read the shit I'm
Yeah.
sending to them. So I'm here about like, it's not about, yeah, I'm not about trying to do amazing design.
No.
Maximum contrast, maximum readability. Absolutely.
And most nonprofits, their designer, you kick stuff to the designer and they come back with a light blue on a white background on a glossy sheet of paper, which is exactly what we were using where I'm a development director for years before I got here. And you can't read it. I mean, the people, like our audience is 40s, 50s, 60s. There's no way to read it. And it's on a glossy background. So look at your promo material at your nonprofit. Guarantee you're going to find a big old nice pile of different promo materials that are just very unreadable. Colin Wheeldon, I think said that correctly. In his book, Type and Layout, Are You Communicating or Just Making Pretty Shapes? He did a study, and you've probably seen this chart. I love this chart. Have it memorized by now. What is the comprehension level when you're using different colors of text on different color backgrounds? And ultimately, the ceiling for good comprehension tends to be about 70%. So black on white, kind of as good as it's going to get. 70% of people have good readability. If you go to white on black, 0% have good readability and 88% have poor comprehension. Same thing almost, it's even worse for white on a French blue, 0% good comprehension, and everybody else, 96% is poor. So that's just a nice chart if you're a graphic designer or you're bored or people are kind of upset that it's not super pretty. Clunky is good. Clunky fundraising that's readable does really well because it came from a person. Now, this isn't really typography, but it's the stuff around the typography. White space is your BFF. If you look at all the fundraising you get, it probably is cramped design, tiny font, minimal space between the paragraphs. Everything is shoved on to 2 pieces of paper or 1. There's barely any margins. You see the text is crowding the images. Everything's crammed onto 1 page. And if fundraising is hard to read, it won't be read. And then you can't raise money. I mean, it's as simple as that. So the last thing is, this isn't really typography, but I want to get it in there. The eyes as they scan, remember that letter where Siegfried von Bugala, it's not going to be right, but I'm trying. At top right hand corner, how the eyes skim. How do you carry the eyes across the page? You can do that by using things like headings, subheadings, pull quotes, and emphasize text, which if you're going to emphasize text, you could use bolding and underlining or highlight. But that's a way to kind of carry the eyes and make sure that the most important information is seen during those 15 seconds at best you're getting when someone's scanning. But don't be like me, because if you emphasize everything, you emphasize nothing. When I read a book or John's Creative Deviations, it's all marked up. That means when I go back through, I don't even know what to read because everything's been emphasized. So that's just worth noting. And then, yeah, then if you want to come to my website, I'd love to stay in touch. And that's kind of, that's all I got today. So snaps.
Very good, Danielle. Thank you very much. I mean, there is a thing called visual hierarchy, which again,
Yes.
you have to make a decision. And again, I can tell designers who don't understand this idea, what's the first biggest most important thing? What's the second most important thing? What's the third most important thing? Not everything can be important. And if you do it the other way around, then nothing's important. So you have to, again, in letter design, the name is important, but the copy itself, everything is kind of much the same. But again, even if you look at anything that has emphasis, it should tell the story. It should repeat what you're asking for. So when I just skim, I know exactly what I'm there for, and I can go, yeah, I'll do that, or I won't do that. But
Read the bolding, the emphasized text in a letter you get from a nonprofit. You're going to be horrified. It doesn't stand on its own at all. And all the pronouns are shoved onto the emphasized text normally. We, he, they. He doesn't. It's hard.
it's a whole study into itself. Go on, sorry.
Visual hierarchy. No, I interrupted. Visual hierarchy. So that is the typography term for what's emphasized.
It's designed more than it is typography. Because again, if you have a page, if you look at a front page of a newsletter, of a newspaper, if they still exist,
Yeah, I haven't seen
the
one in a
visual
minute.
hierarchy there. Usually there's one big photograph that covers the fold of the newsletter of the newspaper. That's the most important thing. That's the thing that's drawing you in. And it might be a picture of Trump saying fight, fight, fight. It could be whatever it is happening this day in the newspaper. But there has to be, that's the most important thing. What's the second most important thing? Probably the headline with it.
Ooh,
But not every article can have the same amount of emphasis because then nothing has
yep.
emphasis. You have to think about what is the first thing I want someone to look at? What's the second thing I want to look at? I've got a great graphic somewhere on my computer. Even though it shows this is the first thing, this is the second thing, this is the third thing, the designer knew what they wanted you to look at by the
Yep.
way they designed the elements. And
Which is
it's
why the PS, everybody says the PS is so important and should restate your offer, because that's where the eyes go.
Yeah, it's like probably the second most important thing in your letter, aside from the person's name and address. If you get those two things wrong, you are dead in the water. Because
I
again,
will
there's a
say
big decision to give, and that's it. If they're not there, they're gone.
I wrote a thank you letter to one of our biggest donors ever 6 years ago. I was doing it while I was in church, which was a bad idea because I didn't want to sit in church when I had letters to write, and I spelled it wrong. But he got a big apology, lots of apologies. He's still giving. He's giving more than he was. So that I was spared because I thought, oh, that's horrific. So now, yeah, when you're talking to donors that are giving a lot, you better make sure their names perfect.
At the very least. Danielle, thank you for your little session on typography. I love talking
Thank
about
you.
typography, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we do something like this.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Bye, guys.